It's only been 2 weeks since Donald Trump was sworn into office, but with the constant fire hose of White House news and Trump announcements, it feels like it's been perhaps a little bit longer for you. Joining us to unpack some of it are the co-hosts of The Rest is Politics U.S. podcast, Anthony Scaramucci and Katty Kay. Thank you both so much for joining us this morning, and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mercedes. Oh my God, only 2 weeks. Every day, Anthony texts me to say, it's only another 1,000 days to go. Are you ready? And I think everyone else around the world needs to buckle up, because this is going to be a long 4 years, a long, crazy, wild 4 years.
It has been absolutely action-packed, announcement after announcement, executive order after executive order. He's been out in front of the cameras almost every day talking. I guess no one, Anthony, can accuse him of not immediately starting to implement his mandate or promises and continuing to put his rhetoric out there. What stands out to you about these first 2 weeks in office?
Well, listen, considerably less chaotic. As crazy as the news cycle is, it's actually less chaotic than it was in 2017. I guess the thing that stands out for me is this implementation of tariffs, which, we're talking about two great allies, Mexico and Canada. We all live here in the Western Hemisphere. We're all part of the same North American continent. And I think it's quite odd for the leader of the free world to be doing this to two of our strongest allies. So I'm surprised that there's no pushback. The Wall Street markets are selling off. There are economists. Scott Bessent is a smart guy. There are people in his ear that know this is wrong, but I sort of know that they're not saying anything. It's sort of the emperor has no clothes moment for the United States.
I know, Anthony, you've talked before about his expectations of almost extreme loyalty, and of course, people like you who stood up to him and said, no, that something was not a good idea, he got rid of them. Do you think that his approach this time has been to surround himself with yes men and women who are not going to say, Mr. President, actually, that idea doesn't make a lot of sense?
I do think that that's the case. And, I could give you an example where somebody like a Gary Cohen, when he was trying to impose steel tariffs in the last term, they just made the paperwork disappear. And there were lots of different things that happened like that in that administration. I think now he's got what we would all call the MAGA people, where they passed this loyalty test, this sort of unconditional loyalty to Donald Trump, which I see as very dangerous. I think every president needs some people in the room to give them the honest scoop. It doesn't feel like the president has many of those people.
Katty, one of the things that I think has struck a few people has been this almost silence from the Democrats, or their inability at least to seize the spotlight from Donald Trump. You've heard a few at obviously nominations pushing back on Trump's selections, but Trump has clearly dominated the news cycle. Why do you think that is, and why have the Democrats not been able to push back on this?
It looks like two armies that have come in for a battle, and the opposing army had all its weapons ready and had a strategy and an attack plan, and the defending army was caught asleep with their weapons hidden in the ground and no attack plan. I mean, that's what it feels like in Washington right now. The Democrats feel completely on their back foot. They genuinely thought they were going to win last November. I've spoken to very senior people in the Harris campaign who woke up that morning convinced that they were going to win. And I think they've spent the last 3 months thinking, why didn't we win? Having tons of retreats and conversations about what they need to do to reach voters that they failed to reach this time around. And their focus has been on that. It hasn't really been on this onslaught. So when the battle started and they were suddenly hit with a whirlwind of activity, and that was part of the strategy from the Trump White House, was just throw everything at it, flood the zone, as Stephen Miller likes to say, they have found it very difficult to fight back. They've had the odd press conference when something's gone particularly wrong, but they are still figuring out what their message is going to be, who it's going to be, who's the leader. And they're on the other side, they have a Republican Party that at the moment seems remarkably united in a White House that is very much in step with Donald Trump. Anthony's problem is in the first administration, he never learned to do what a senior advisor told me you have to do in the Trump White House, which is speak Trump. And that's why Anthony only lasted for 11 days. But in this White House, they're all speaking Trump. And so they are united around the president. And so far, Democrats haven't managed to get much of a wedge between them.
Somebody actually remarked to me, sorry, go ahead, Anthony.
I just want to jump on that for a second, because not only is Katty right, I want to provide evidence. whether it was Duffy, the Secretary of Transportation, Hegseth, Defense. They got to the microphone, J.D. Vance, the Vice President, and the first several sentences were praising Donald Trump before they shared any other information with the press. And that's sort of the kabuki dance that you have to do with Donald Trump. So I think Katty is 100% right about that.
Anthony, Elon Musk is sort of this very interesting character that we're all watching up here, and he's gone from presenting himself as his self-styled dark MAGA to now getting involved in right-wing politics around the world. He seems to sort of see himself as a self-appointed, I don't want to say savior, but person who can influence these elections in countries all over. How does Donald Trump handle him, and does that become problematic for two people that both like to have the spotlight at some point?
Well, it'll become long-term problematic. Remember, Elon has so much money and he was so helpful to Trump that I don't think it ends in that sort of Pyrrhic nightmare that takes place for most people that are associated with Donald Trump. I think this is sort of a fadeaway, if you will. Trump has told people that Musk is someone that we just have to wait out. He'll get tired or bored, move on to something else. Of course, Susie Wiles pinched Musk and took away his access to the president in the West Wing. I guess the real issue is, how does Elon Musk get a badge to go in and out of the White House and influence policy while being the CEO of 6 or 7 different companies, including 2 that have serious governmental contracts? So I don't understand how they're getting around the ethical codes and the ethical procedures related to Elon Musk, but we'll have to see what happens. But these guys like breaking norms, and so I'm just very surprised the Democrats haven't jumped on this harder.
Katty, you're British, I'm Canadian. We're both watching this a bit from the outside, from our background. Your take on Elon Musk and how he's going to influence America's interfacing with the rest of the world?
When he starts getting involved in domestic politics, as he has in the UK, as he has in Canada, as he has in Germany, then that is very difficult for them to push back. And particularly when, as Anthony says, he doesn't even have an elected position. He's not even confirmed by the Senate or anything. He's an incredibly powerful business person, and a lot of European governments also have business contracts with him. But he is the one that is throwing everybody else because he has this enormous microphone. I mean, I think one thing about all of this, Mercedes, and this is what Anthony and I are trying to do on the Rest is Politics podcast every week, is try and separate out for our audiences, whether they're in Canada or the UK or in the US, what is signal and what is noise? What is performative and what is substantive? What's really going to change America? Because a lot of what Donald Trump is doing is show for the MAGA base, but it's not going to make a profound difference to the country in 10, 20 years' time. So what are the things that really are going to change America? And as Anthony said at the beginning, I would argue that things like tariffs on one of your closest allies, best neighbors of 25%, that is the kind of thing that makes a long-term impact to America's standing around the world and its links with its allies. And one day the United States might need Canada, and Canadians won't forget this.
Such a great way of putting it, Katty, that what is the show with Donald Trump, which he loves, and the art of the deal, Anthony? And what is he actually really serious about in the long term? If you had to separate this out, where do you see the actual policy changes and where do you see the rhetoric?
Okay, let me be generous to him for a moment. I think what he's trying to do is flex on people, show people his power, and then see if he can influence them with this cudgel, this sort of threat, if you will. And so he did that with Colombia. He said that you're going to take these refugees, these political asylum seekers, we're flying them back to their country. You're going to take them, or we're going to impose tariffs. And I think we could be seeing a move by him to do this. And who knows, it's Donald Trump. 2 or 3 weeks from now, he could rescind those tariffs and claim victory, that he won some type of a victory on fentanyl or some type of a victory on the borders of Canada and Mexico with the United States. So it's just one of these weird things. We'll have to see what happens. But I think Katty is right. It's making America a less predictable ally, and it's going to cause places like Canada and Mexico to seek alliances elsewhere, which is going to damage the long-term spirit and goodwill of America. America's built up this goodwill over 80 years, and Donald Trump really wants to break a system that's worked well for America.
A lot of questions ahead for Americans, for the world, about how all of this will unfold. Certainly for those of us here in Canada, a big week. Thank you both so much for joining us with your insight, and I hope we can have you back again soon.
Good to be with you.
Thanks, Mercedes.